Greetings sailors and welcome to the final part of my very first look at the French cruisers. So once again, just in case you haven't watched the other two parts, basically what I did was I sat down and recorded the first game in each one. Now they have changed a little bit since then and there might be further changes coming, so what you see on the screen is definitely not guaranteed to what as to what they'll be when they finally come out live. And of course, even when they come out live, there will almost certainly be buffs and nerfs in the future as Williamy goes through the stats. Now this particular game here, this is my least creditable I can say that word, my least creditable performance, but it's also going to be by far the worst team I was on with any of these games where I played just the first game. So you can already look at the minimap and see yes, I'm here in my tier 8 cruiser. This is a tier 10 game. This is the Charles Martel, I should say. And I've managed to come off all the way on my own apart from 2 destroyers. The rest of the team is all heading for the B cap point. Well, I say that. They're heading in the direction of the B cap point, but you'll see what transpires. So, the Charles Martel itself, it is a triple turret design. It's 3x3 turrets. And once again, with as you had from going from tier 4 to tier 5, where you had a slightly worse range, this has a slightly worse range, at least when I played it did, and that may be subject to change, than the tier 7 by 300 meters. So it's still not a bad range for a tier 8, but it's no real upgrade. And that doesn't play that well into the playstyle because, yeah, once again, it's a fairly squashy cruiser. And it doesn't do any one thing particularly well. This seems to be the theme of the French, is that they have lots of little downsides, 1 or 2 bigger downsides, and then no real strengths to play to. Although, having said that, I don't think any of them are outright bad. I mean, probably tier for tier, the most kind of substandard of them is the tier 10 as it is at the moment. And if you've watched videos from the likes of iChase and Flamu, and you might have some idea of what I'm going to say as well. But the entire line just kind of feels very indifferent. And I'm not sure if Wargaming's trying to make some complicated joke about the French there, or refer to French stereotypes there, but they've put an awful lot of effort into it, if that's so. Going to a whole line of cruisers just to make some obscure joke about a stereotype. I mean, it's probably the kind of thing I'd do, but I'm not in charge of the Leicester studio, which is probably a good thing for all concerned. So I've realised my peril. I'm completely screwed out here alone. One of the destroyers has died already. That Fletcher's being taken apart. There's a fair number of the enemy team there, but they're also just putting pressure on the middle generally. Our team, meanwhile, yeah, look at them. They're all going south around the outside. We've actually yet to cap any cap circle. We've still got the cap circle we started with, but yeah, I was looking at this and thinking, I'm not having a good feeling about this. So not only was my positioning terrible, not only was I not paying attention to where I was going at the start of the match, but then I very rapidly realised that in this bottom tier game, the chances of me making any kind of difference when you've got a team playing like this on a domination mode map, it's probably going to be quite minimal, because just occasionally you'll meet a team like this which does not know how to play domination. They don't seem to realise that you need the cap circles. We've had a couple of ships trying to cap, but our destroyers seem to have been largely unsupported, and I think we've just lost the last of them. And so now we've just got this big cluster of cruisers and battleships who are milling around and just getting completely picked apart. So at this point I think, okay, I'm doomed. I might as well get some damage out of this. There's no point playing this first match and recording it if I'm not at least going to fire my guns every once in a while. So I knew I was probably screwed, and it was just going to be a question of, well, am I going to be screwed sooner or later? And just looking at the rest of the team, I rather thought it was going to be sooner, because we've killed 3 ships, and one of those was mine, securing a low health kill, and we're just so far behind on points. Now, this is the, this replay right here is the disadvantage of doing what I've been doing, is recording every first match. And so what I did was I went and played another one a little later after this. In fact, it was with the slightly buffed version of this, because what they did was they trimmed the reload time from 12 seconds down to 10 seconds, which is, that's pretty respectable. It's actually an okay rate of fire for a tier 8 cruiser with 8-inch guns. But still, it's that high shell drag, and it's the thin armour, and it's the relatively poor AA, and it's an awkward combination. And I knew against this Hindenburg, the Hindenburg actually has got some armour to work with. It's got superior guns to mine by far. So I knew I was just a bit screwed here. And it's just a question of, can I do a little bit more damage before I die? Because 14k, it's not a lot. It's not a lot at all. I'm not sure why that salvo wasn't AP, by the way. I probably should have gone for AP. I also could have popped the speed boost here, but it would have made functionally no difference whatsoever. So yeah, I think I was thinking HE that I might set fire, and then if I catch him with the torpedo, maybe he floods out or something, but there's no time to do anything. So yeah, the match that I played afterwards, I did do a follow-up match. It was much more respectable. I think I did about 80k damage and managed to live, and we won. So it's capable of doing okay things, but it's, compared to the other tier 8 cruisers I've played, and tier 8 is as high as I am with any cruiser, and this was just profoundly unimpressive. I just didn't like they all just kind of feel like they don't have any strengths to play to, and I'm just left wondering, well, what's the play style that Wargaming's going for here? What's the point of them? The other ones I have played, by the way, just for reference, which I maybe should note so people know where I'm coming from, the Chapayev and the Kutuzov, which is over on the NA server. I've obviously got a Kutsov on the EU as well. Also the New Orleans, the Megami, and the Otago. So I'm somewhat used to playing squashy cruisers at tier 8, but ones that are either stealthier or handle better or have better AA, or they have something going for them. They have radar, for instance, in the case of the Chapayev and the New Orleans. So it's got a speed boost, but you won't notice it. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to be terribly enthused about this ship, but it's hard to be terribly enthused about any of them. But it doesn't feel bad, and that second game that I went and played, it felt okay. It's just it's not a great ship. It's definitely not a great ship. But maybe Wargaming will buff it a bit more, and they'll do something to give the French a bit more, distinctiveness, because at the moment they're really not. So onto the tier 9, this has got, again, 3x3s. This was the most interesting in terms of its choices of consumables. As you can see, I'm not using the speed boost. The speed boost, the catapult fighter, and I think a spotter plane, I can't remember exactly, they're all on the same slot. So I quite happily swapped out the speed boost, and I think most people playing the St. Louis will do exactly the same, because the speed boost just makes so little difference. Now it's the same map this time, but it's a different, it's a standard game mode rather than domination. And we've actually got a sort of even split. I think there's fewer ships going this way, and I'm quite happy to let more armoured ships like the Zau and the Friedrich der Grosse actually take the brunt of the attention here, because I know I really can't. But even though it was, again, a tier 10 game, it's just less bad matchmaking, because I've got some tier 8s to pick on now. So I'm starting off with some HE against this guy, as are my allies here. Once again, the HE not particularly impressive. It just doesn't feel particularly impressive. That's one of the things maybe they could do if they just buffed the French HE so it has a really good fire chance. And you might think, like, as a battleship driver, that is maybe not something I'd want to come up against, but it's not like any of these ships have got a super fast rate of fire. We're not talking the Soviet railguns with the very fast 6-inch guns that can just pepper you over and over again. If you're firing at HE shells from 8-inch guns, and again they're changing this from 12 to 10 seconds. That's the one change we know that they have made. it wouldn't, like, I could live with that, and especially these days when you've got fire prevention as a usable skill for a battleship captain. Yeah, I don't know. That's one area where they could give the French a bit of distinctiveness, is to really change those HE shells. But I don't know. We'll see. So this is, I think, I can't remember what the range is offhand, but yeah, it's a pretty good range. Like the tier 9 and 10 do have pretty good range for cruisers for their tier. So you can at least keep your distance and do what I'm doing and kite the shells a little bit. But of course, while you're doing this, you might struggle to keep most of your firepower where you want it to because of that turret arrangement. And the turrets on these ships, just generally speaking, I noted this in the very first video when I was talking about the general characteristics of the line. The turrets on the whole are on the sluggish side. They're not bad. They're usually around 30-35 seconds, that kind of range, which is, it's okay. There are cruisers with worse turret traverses than that, but generally speaking they have other things going for them. Oh, torpedo armament, that's something I didn't really mention, but with both tier 8 and tier 9, it's the exact same. 9-kilometer torpedoes, 2 triple mounts on, one on each side of the ship, and otherwise there's basically no changes. They still have those good arcs, which you will have noted during that first replay of this video. But when you've only got 3 of them, doesn't count for that much. And I think I said in the first video as well that the reload's not bad, but it's not particularly good considering that you've only got 3 of them. So yeah, they're usable in some circumstances, but you might as well have given them higher damage, and there we go. So your AP still will work at range if you can get the right targets. Yeah, they might have given you like shorter range but more powerful ones, like the Germans have. I'm not entirely sure what the thought was with having the 9-kilometer torpedoes. I'd rather have punchier ones that you can use when you're rushing up close to somebody. Because, yeah, trying to fire torpedoes at somebody at 9 kilometers, when you've only got 3 of them, you know, if you're doing it at max range, you're not going to have a very high success rate with those. So this is a slightly better scenario. I'm in company. We're picking on these ships one by one. We've killed the Amagi already. The Zau's been forced to back off dramatically, and this Bismarck is now under fire. But we're also being capped, so that has to be one of the enemy teams to destroy it. On the southwestern side, well, our team is a bit more in disarray, but they're still in good health. And so, although the enemy team does seem to be pressing and scattering them a bit, we haven't really lost that many ships over here, and it's not looking like it's going to be that big of an issue. If we can deal with that Bismarck particularly, and we can almost afford to ignore the Zau for now and then just turn around and deal with the ships coming from the west, that should be okay. But first we have to take out this Kagero. Now I'm not entirely sure what this guy's thought process was. This is also the point, by the way, where I kind of wished I had Hydro instead of the catapult, or not instead of the catapult, instead of defensive AA, which is maybe on the higher tier French cruisers something you might want to go for more than defensive, just because you don't see a huge number of high tier carriers. But without defensive AA, the AA on these ships is not really very good. Even if you go for an AA spec, the caliber of guns that you'll get the benefit of manual AA from, for instance, they don't give a lot of DPS to begin with. So that was a second kill, and we've also killed the Bismarck. The Zau's run away back up off north, although we've got an Ibuki that's pursuing, and the rest of us have turned around to deal with the enemies from the west. Now, this has been this was a much closer game. This is a much more enjoyable sort of game. This is the kind of game where you feel like actually the teams have a genuine matchup. Like the previous match in the Charles Martel, it was pretty obvious that there was a dramatic mismatch in overall player skill between the two teams. Our team just completely folded, and despite the fact I really didn't do a lot, I think I was still halfway up the team list. So this kind of game, though, this is just so much more enjoyable, where we're kind of even on both victory points and ships, and it feels like there's still a lot left for me to contribute. And it's actually somewhat unusual for me to enjoy a standard game at high tiers as much as I liked playing this one. but that's just because it was an even match. It was not one-sided, and I think I would have enjoyed this in any Tier 9 cruiser. Not that I have any, as I've said, but this situation I'm in now, it gives me opportunity to put fire into people without actually getting hit in return, which is kind of the ideal for any cruiser. It's not unique to this cruiser or any of the other fragile cruisers. There are some of the other cruisers where you can afford to take a bit more risk and afford to try and bow tank shells a bit more. But in this case, if you can stay safe, then you probably should stay safe. And taking risk and taking the risk even and spending your hit points is something you should do only when you know that it's going to pay off. Now that North Carolina, that wasn't great positioning, and he has managed to fall prey to the last remaining enemy destroyer, the Fletcher. And once again, this is me wishing I had Hydra or something, but I'm just going to have to... Like, I've put my spread of torpedoes out. I don't know why I put out a widespread there. I think that was just a... you know, if it works kind of thing. And if there had been cover between me and the Missouri, I think maybe I might have tried charging the smoke a bit more aggressively. But I'm very wary of trying to take down that Fletcher, and oh hello, that's an island, and putting myself at risk from being shot by battleships, because I know full well that I can get overmatched frontally through the deck, as happened in the Algerie game. So that's just a feature, I think, of all of the French cruisers, that they can, whatever the tier, well, I say whatever the tier, for the higher tier ones where you meet the battleships with bigger caliber guns, I think all of them can be overmatched through the deck, especially through the foredeck, because none of them have particularly strong foredeck armor. Even not just the you know, the armor at the pointy bit, the pointy end of the ship generally, but the actual deck armor. That's kind of like the most problematic thing. So I'm up to 80k damage. I've what was the third kill I got? I don't know. Oh, it was the Yamato, wasn't it? Yeah. So I did manage to sneak another kill with the low health Yamato. But I thought I'd try the AP at. I mean, this is relatively close range. We're under 10 kilometers now. I thought I'd give the AP a go against this Iowa, and it's somewhat successful. He's not pointing his guns at me, but somebody is. But then this Fletcher pops up, and that's definitely a more pertinent target right now, because he's going to try and take out our two battleships. So this is, I mean, I could be farming damage off this Iowa, but no, my highest priority at this point is taking down the Fletcher. And then the low health Missouri appears, and that's too tempting a target to ignore as well. So I end up doing a silly thing and splitting my fire. I should just be concentrating on the Fletcher, and instead I get a bit distracted by the low health battleship. And yes, that's a valuable target to take out, but that Fletcher needs to die. So the Fletcher smokes, the Missouri's now shooting me because I was shooting him. We've also had a trade between the Iowa and our... Was that also an Iowa? I'm not sure, but they basically did drive by and basically nuked each other. Izumo, that was it. It was in Izumo, wasn't it? So that leaves me and the De Grosser against this low health Missouri, and the is it Chapayev? I think it's a Chapayev, the remaining enemy cruiser. The Zhao did get taken care of by our Ibuki, but he was very low health, so the Ibuki would have had to try really hard to throw that fight. So I've lost a bit of health, but I do have a heal. If only I would remember to use it. Because Tier 9, yes, with all the Tier 9s, or all the Tier 9 cruisers anyways, is where you get the heal for the first time. So there's the Fletcher down. The Missouri gets taken down by our De Grosser. It's a fourth kill, and if we can get another one, well, technically it's a Kraken, but it won't actually be a Kraken because these are preview ships, and so therefore they don't give you rewards for your account. Now this guy is border humping at the moment, and so my first salvo is completely off, and it's going to be compounded by the fact that he then scrapes off the border and starts accelerating again, and it's just really hard to, like, for people that aren't in some kind of constant motion. I think that's going to be a good way to throw off French cruiser shells, just because you are constantly having to deal with that shell drag, is to vary your speed, vary your course, and the shells are going to take so long to get there that at anything other than close ranges yeah, it's kind of like you get that with maybe an example most people would be familiar with is playing against Clevelands in the mid-tiers, and if you're in something that can maneuver fairly well, or American destroyers, you can, or the Atlanta or the Flint, you know, you get that rainbow arc of shells and you can dodge them quite easily as long as you're not at very close range. And I think that's going to be true playing against the French cruisers. It won't be that hard to dodge the shells. So no final kill. As you can see, the Des Moines that was actually on the flank I initially went to scored top of the team, so they did very well, and I was not that far behind, 3rd place, 1800 base XP, not bad, just shy of 100,000 damage done. So that was I think this was by far the most respectable match, tier for tier, I had in any of the French cruisers, but it was more the situation I found myself in, and I was able to shepherd my hit points until more towards the end, when I took the risk of going over open water towards the battleships, but I knew there were other things that they'd be shooting at as well. So yeah, it felt okay. It didn't feel terrible, but again, it didn't feel great. It didn't feel like I had any strengths to particularly play to. So it's just, once again, that's just a line in a nutshell. It feels so kind of like devoid of any particular playstyle that you should be aiming for. So the tier 10, the Henri IV, and yeah, this has already picked up a rather unkind nickname as a result of the acronym that you can make from its name, but I won't repeat it here because I'm not sure it's terribly fair, and not sure it's terribly politically correct either. Anyway, so tier 10 game, this time with a carrier. This particular machine, actually, you've moved on from the 8-inch guns. You've now got 240mm guns, which is, in principle, you know, that sounds really good. Biggest guns of any cruiser, but this is wargaming, and so with the big guns come the big penalties. So you're not quite battleship caliber. I mean, bear in mind, 11-inch guns are, what was it, 283mm, something like that. So the guns you find on, for instance, the Grash Bay and the Scharnhorst, they're not quite that size, but these are still fairly big guns. But because you're getting towards a battleship caliber, you're also starting to get some of those penalties. It does have some good points, though. The gun range is very good for a cruiser. It's currently 19 point something kilometers, which is, it's maybe going to encourage people to play like this, but also it means with the current state of the game, you can't stealth fire in this thing anymore. Like, once upon a time, maybe you could have gotten it to a state like the Zao where you could stealth fire, but you can't mechanically anymore. So even though people might be firing from long range, again, you've got that shell drag. Now that's something that's actually been reduced. That's one of the changes they made between me playing this and then the patch coming out, and there might still be further changes yet, of course. But they actually reduced the amount of shell drag. But that's not really the biggest problem with this ship. Now, it looks really thinly armoured in the armour viewer, and it turns out, and I mentioned this in the last video, a couple of people corrected me, there's actually 240mm, not 240, it was 140. I can't remember. I think 140 sounds much more likely. I think it's 140mm of Citadel belt, but it doesn't show up in the armour viewer because you strip away the thing and it looks like just like 30mm. So it's in the side armour for some reason at the moment, but it's not actually on the surface layer. So there's like 2 layers of armour, but in your armour viewer it just shows as the side armour. So it's better armoured than it seems, but it's still got that thin armour deck. It's still got a 25mm armour deck. So it will get overmatched. And some of the low tier cruisers on other lines have got thin enough armour decks that they also will get overmatched through the deck. But I think this is the only tier 10 cruiser that has that issue. So that's definitely a count against it. It's also a big ship. Doesn't get spotted quite as soon as the Moskva gets spotted, but you will get seen from quite far away. So stealth is out the window. Because it's a big ship, you handle kind of like a battleship. You've got actually a less attractive set of consumables compared to the Saint Louis, where you can actually choose not to use the speed boost, but this doesn't have a catapult on it, so there's even if you could have something in the speed boost slots, it couldn't be the catapult. It would have to be Hydro. They'd have to do something different there. And I don't think they've ever had a ship where the Hydro wasn't also in the same slot as the defensive, if they weren't just in separate slots already. It's got generally poor handling because of its size. I might have said that already, actually. I think that's what I was going for when I was talking about its size, just saying that it does not handle particularly well in the water. The AA for its tier is, I mean, it's somewhat respectable, but it's still not good, and you're still, in a game like this with a carrier, going to be relying on defensive AA. And really, I think the worst thing about it overall is it lacks DPM rather badly compared to the other tier 10 cruisers. And there's actually been some interesting analysis of this in places like Reddit and the forums, and people have been figuring out, you know, the number of fires per minute and the amount of HE damage per minute and the number of AP, you know, the AP broadside and the AP frontal and all these kind of, you know, there's different ways you can slice and dice it, but generally speaking, the Henri IV does not do well, and it's because it's got those bigger guns. And because it's got bigger guns, it's got a longer reload, and you still have all the other issues of the French shells. So it's incredibly lackluster. I think it's tier for tier one of the weaker ones, just because of all those factors. It does not stack up well as a group of stats. What should be a strength, the bigger guns, actually becomes a bit of a liability. And unlike the other big, long, awkward ship with the large caliber guns, the Moskva, you don't have radar, which is a big boon for the Moskva, and you don't have the I don't think you have the rate of fire. You don't have the other good qualities of Soviet guns. You've got all the awkwardness, and you can't bow tank as you can with the Moskva, which is quite a valid strategy in that ship. So at the moment, this is rather a poor tier 10 cruiser. It's not really a good kind of, like, this is a ship you could go for. I think honestly the tier 9, just from my so far limited experience, honestly feels more fun for its tier than this thing. So yeah, there's not a huge amount that's good to say about this, and I suspect there will be probably further changes before it goes live, or at least I hope there will. So this is getting towards the end of this one. If you can look at the victory points, or if you've been paying attention to the victory points, you'll maybe realise that, yeah, we've been winning. I wish we've been losing this one for a little while, and I spent most of this game just playing rather defensively. But despite the fact, I mean, we have taken out half the enemy team, but it's just not been enough. And again, it's a domination game where we have really failed to do much with the cap points, and despite having killed half the enemy team, it doesn't matter. They have a huge points advantage, and now we're down to our last 2 ships anyway. So this wasn't quite as bad as a game as I had in the Charles Martel, but it still wasn't a great match. But at least I did a lot more in that one, damage-wise, and I got to put it through its paces a little bit more, and also test out the AA a bit more as well with those carriers. So yes, all in all, a pretty disappointing end to the line as it stands at the moment. And everybody else that I have watched videos of, because people usually go for the tier 10 first, you know, it's the first one to have anything made about it. Yeah, everybody else that's done videos on the Henri IV, even looking at it after they have changed some of the stats, they are not exactly unanimous in their praise, far from it. They're unanimous in the opposite, in fact. So this one, I think, will see further buffs before it goes live. I can't imagine that they will put it out in the current state. But just the line overall, yeah, if there were any particular fans of French ships that were waiting with bated breath for a full line to come out, I think they'll be disappointed. And it's not like the British cruisers where, yeah, it's a fragile line and they've only got AP, but they also have the smoke, so they have a particular playstyle. They have strengths you can play to. There are ways you can use these ships. And there's something about the French that just feels so generic, because if they imagined the speed boost would be it on a cruiser, it's really not. They would have to do something mechanically. They would have to make it so that the speed boost means you lose less speed in turns, for instance, or it gives you a tighter turning radius, or it just improves your mobility. You know, it improves your rudder response. It just improves your whole mobility, not just your straight line speed. Because as it is, just a little, you know, like an extra knot or two on your straight line speed in a cruiser, especially these cruisers, it doesn't do anything. It's not a flavour. It's irrelevant. It's just a nothing. So fingers crossed, Wargaming take all this on board and they come back to us with something that is a bit more palatable, that actually has some strengths to play to, that's just a bit more fun. Because at the moment, that's what's lacking from the French cruisers. I don't think any of them are... Maybe beyond the low tiers. There were some ones at the low tiers I enjoyed, but generally speaking, they're just not fun. So that's my thoughts on the French cruisers so far. My initial thoughts. There will be changes to these, as I've said, hopefully for the better. And well, while we're waiting for those, you can leave comments below on what you thought of these videos and this different format. You can hit the like button if you enjoyed it. You can sub to my channel if you haven't already. And as always, stay tuned for more.